In the Florida Everglades, we have the shallow Florida Bay, sandy beaches, cypress swamps, and the uplands consisting of pine flatwoods and hardwood hammocks. This unique region of North America is home to some extravagant wildlife such as bottlenose dolphins, American alligators and crocodiles, Florida panthers, and the invasive Burmese python. But have you ever thought about what Pokemon would occur in the Florida Everglades? And if you watch this channel, you're probably answering, well, yeah, of course I have. So let's make a Pokemon food web out of the Florida Everglades. Florida is the sunshine state, and you are guaranteed to get plenty of sun out in Florida Bay, which, if you are a producer like phytoplankton or seagrass or algae, is a good thing. These are our main producers of the marine environments in the Everglades. Phytoplankton are comprised of photosynthetic bacteria and some protists like diatoms, and are actually responsible for about half of global photosynthetic activity and at least half of the oxygen production on Earth. These are going to be eaten by a variety of organisms which usually must have special adaptations in order to capture them out of the water column, such as the straining baleen of whalmer or the grasping tentacles of binacle or liliep. Other consumers of phytoplankton include wiglet, shelder, pheon, horsey, tentacool, and other aquatic invertebrates such as crustaceans, bivalves, or jellyfish. Consuming seagrass, macroalgae, and possibly tentacool, we have the omnivore war turtle. Modern sea turtles represent herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores, so I could see war turtle having any of these diets. Its small fang-like projections might suggest it being more of a carnivore, but they could also just be used for combat, with Squirtle learning Bite at level 12 and might help them defend themselves from predators like Sharpedo, or for intraspecific combat, which is combat between members of the same species. Some of our secondary consumers, or predators, include Staryu and Krabby preying on our smaller benthic Pokemon, or those that live on the ocean floor. Consuming some of our normal aquatic invertebrates we mentioned earlier, we have Kabuto and Wimpod eating prey that they find in the sand. And eating prey just above the sand, we have the ambush predator Stunfisk. This Pokemon likely buries itself in the sand or mud to wait for prey to get just a little bit too close before stunning the prey with their electricity and slurping them into their mouths, which is why we have a habit of stepping on them in the Pokemon games. Another Pokemon in this trophic level is Wishy-Washy, which feeds on prey suspended in the water column. This probably includes larval crustaceans as well as some plankton. Going up one trophic level to our tertiary consumers, we have Pokemon like Slowbro, Lapras, and Flamigo eating some of our shellfish-like Pokemon. Mantine, Remoraid, and Palafin preying on Wishy-Washy and Stunfisk. And here's an aside to this food web real quick. Do you think Stunfisk evolved electricity for prey capture or for defending itself against predators? Like, this Pokemon is aquatic, but it's not a water type, and being surrounded by a bunch of water types in your aquatic environment has got to be terrible for a ground type Pokemon, right? Like, this thing probably hides underneath the sand not just for ambushing prey, but so it can stay alive. Like, you don't want Palafin swimming by and just wave crashing into you over and over if you're a ground type, and that's going to be super effective. I believe the consensus with electric organs in modern day fishes was that it evolved for prey capture and was later adapted for predator deterrence. And lots of fish have this electrolocation, which allowed them to find the electric currents that their prey species put off. And I think this is how, like, Luxray is able to use its, like, X-ray vision or see through solid objects in order to find its prey, because it's actually just using electrolocation. But that one's not found in the Florida Everglades, so we're gonna have to save that for later. Some more aquatic or semi-aquatic predators in the Florida Bay habitat include Barraskewda and a variety of piscivorous bird-like Pokemon, with Wingull and Pelipper, Kilowattrel, and Cramorant. And at the top of the food chain in Florida Bay sits Sharpedo. This carnivorous Pokemon, with its high attack and ability to chase down prey at 75 miles an hour, makes Sharpedo truly the bully of the sea. Sharpedo probably eats primarily Wishy-Washy or Slowpoke that venture out too deep, but I could also imagine it preying on young Finazons and Lapras if they get separated from their family groups, or Mantine and Remoraid if they bump into some. Moving inland from Florida Bay of the Everglades, we have some transitional habitats to get us from the ocean up onto land. These are mangrove forests and coastal beaches. Here you are likely to find Wiglet and Krabby in the intertidal zones, being somewhat amphibious, and we will get the ambush predator Sandygast. Sandygast acts like a pitfall trap or an antlion lying in wait in the sand. When prey like crabs or Wimpod get too close, it can open its mouth and swallow its unsuspecting prey whole. Along these beaches, you can also find Alolan Exeggutor, which enjoys the ample sunlight, and the jack-of-all-trades Pokemon of the Everglades, Zigzagoon. Zigzagoon can be found patrolling beaches looking for washed-up meals, traversing semi-aquatic environments in the marshes, or running amongst the saw palmetto and pine needles in the pine flatwoods. Zigzagoon eats pretty much anything it can find as long as it can chew it or defeat it in battle, and this is referenced with its pickup ability. Our next habitat are the marshes of the Everglades, which is probably the habitat you think of when you think of the Everglades. Marshes are adjacent to our mangroves and our beaches, and besides Zigzagoon, we can also find Exeggutor and Lotad functioning as some of our producers, along with various plants like sawgrass, buttonbush, and pickerelweed, amongst many others. This region of the world is unique in that it contains both forms of Exeggutor. Historically, Alolan Exeggutor was considered native to this region, but recent genetic analysis suggests that it might have been brought over by early trainers that emigrated to the Everglades. Alolan Exeggutor is more tolerant of saltwater and less tolerant of cold temperatures than Cantonian Exeggutor, which is why this version tends to occur on beaches where saltwater reduces competition from other grass types, and the ocean helps to insulate the air temperature, which reduces a chance of freezing. So we find Cantonian Exeggutor more inland in freshwater and surviving colder temperatures, since it's only 2 times weak to ice instead of 4 like its Alolan relative. This reflects the occurrence of a dozen species of palms that are native to Florida. And of a wide variety of habitats, we have Florida's state tree, the sable palm, which isn't really an inspiration for Exeggutor, but it's middling height, it can tolerate cold temperatures, kind of like Exeggutor. And Alolan Exeggutor is obviously reminiscent of coconut palms, which may or may not be technically native to Florida, but can be found widespread in the southern half of the state due to gardening and landscaping appeal. Recent research into the global distribution and genetics of coconut palms suggests that they originated from Southeast Asia and were domesticated by the peoples there, and eventually were brought over to the New World over 2,000 years ago. So maybe Alolan Exeggutor isn't native to the Everglades, but it's probably been here a long time. Next up, our primary consumers, or herbivores, of the freshwater marshes are shellmet, corefish, a variety of insects, natu and farfetch'd, wormadam, and deerling and dedenne. Dedenne may seem like an odd Pokemon to encounter here, but given that 5 different species of mice and rats live in the Everglades, and peninsular Florida experiences more lightning strikes than almost anywhere else in North America, I bet dedenne that were released by trainers from the Kalos region would live happy lives here. Just imagine them running amongst the tall grass and getting struck by lightning. But like in a good way so that they can charge their electric attacks maybe? This is also the reason I'm including Thundurus down here. I have no idea what this would eat, maybe it just survives off absorbing lightning in its Therian form, but also its teeth are giving carnivore vibes. If you have a good idea for the diet of Thundurus, let me know, but otherwise it's just kind of flying around Florida having a good time. Now if you've ever been to the Everglades, you know that we have a multitude of insects here, which means we are going to have a lot of insectivores. These Pokemon are going to basically take up this whole corner of the food web. Freshwater marshes are important habitats for many insects that start their lives in an aquatic stage such as dragonflies, mosquitoes, and mayflies. Our aquatic or amphibious insectivores are barboach, whooper, the palpitoad line, dreepy, frogadier, and bellybolt. Our more terrestrial insectivores, maybe they live on emergent vegetation or are airborne, are carablast, which may actually just be a shellmet specialist here, Yanma and Talo, Weepinbell and Carnivine, and the nocturnal swoobat that nests in tree cavities in this region, as well as Trico and Kecleon. And I am so happy I finally get to put Kecleon in a Pokemon food web because this is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. Like encountering this guy in Route 119 in Hoenn for the first time was like a magical experience. Everything about that route was great, like the rain and the puddles and the wooden bridge, and it just like felt like that was one of the first routes that like really came alive and was trying to be like a more natural setting. And if that isn't like a Pokemon version of like a marsh, then I don't know what is. Besides like the Great Marsh, whatever. Which is why I think that Kecleon would fit perfect in the Florida Everglades. We also have an exotic chameleon problem down here from chameleons being released by like pet owners or breeders. So you can just find veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, and even Ostelet's giant chameleons just in random bushes around in the backcountry. We also have an apex insectivore that is functioning as an ecosystem engineer in the marshes. This Pokemon uses its speed and agility to catch bug types on the wing, and can use its specialized forelimbs to slice through thick grasses in order to search for hidden prey. Our predator is Scyther. Like beavers in real life, Scyther has evolved to manipulate its environment in order to make it more hospitable. Beavers will dam flowing water in order to create deeper ponds, and construct lodges to increase their foraging area for aquatic prey and provide protection against their terrestrial predators. Like a woodpecker, Scyther may hack through woody vegetation to search for insect larvae, or like elephants, they may topple over taller vegetation, which opens up new food sources for smaller herbivores. I could see Scyther cutting, and maybe like modern birds, arranging tall grasses into nests or display stages for attracting mates. These heaps of vegetation may then help drive these fire-adapted habitats by providing concentrated sources of fuels. South Florida plants and animals have adapted to natural fires started by lightning strikes in the rainy season. This fire helps nutrient recycling by burning up old vegetation that can then enter the soil, which promotes new growth of understory plants and increases habitat heterogeneity that some species may prefer. So by cutting larger, older, and tougher vegetation, Scyther encourages the rebirth of its habitat through fire and new plant growth, which could then lead to more food for its insect and bug-type prey organisms, which then leads to healthier Scyther, and the cycle continues on. And one of our few non-insectivorous secondary consumers here is Electrike. Electrike is probably somewhat of a generalist, eating a wide variety of prey, such as insects and small mammals, reptiles, and birds. But since the introduction of Dedenne into the Everglades, they have been a main predator of this electric rodent. Electrike uses its lightning rod ability to absorb the attacks that Dedenne relies on to deter predators, and can dispatch them with a quick attack or maybe a shockwave. Moving on to the marshes tertiary consumers, or predators that eat other predators, we have Dreadnought, Vaporeon, Marill, and Arachnid eating aquatic prey. Probably things like barboach and polywag, and actual fish and amphibians. Then at the top of the food chain in our marshes, the first apex predator is going to be Goodra. Goodra evolves from Sliggoo in the rain or fog, so it's a good thing that the Everglades, and the rest of South Florida, experience a true rainy season from about May to October, receiving upwards of 65 inches of rain each year. While Goodra has the ability Sap Sipper, suggesting it might be somewhat herbivorous, thanks to Pokedex entries, we know that at least Sliggoo is a predator, using its sticky mucus to digest its prey before consuming them. This method of feeding is called extraoral digestion, and in modern animals can be seen in things like true bugs and spiders. This paper even suggests that 79% of predaceous land-dwelling arthropods use extraoral digestion. This feeding strategy allows predators to take down relatively large prey that may otherwise be hard to consume due to exoskeletons or shells. Because of this, I could see Sliggoo hunting Pokemon like Shelmet, Corphish, and Wormadam, with Goodra able to ingest slightly larger or more agile prey thanks to its size and true mouth like Lotad, Electrike, or a few bird Pokemon that get caught up in its mucus. Next, lurking in the deeper waters of the marshes, ambushing aquatic prey or those that get too close to a body of water, the Everglades would not be complete without Feraligatr. Feraligatr's strong bite force and wide jaw suggest that it evolved to crush hard-bodied or shelled prey. Choodles or small Dreadnought probably fall victim to Feraligatr, but this apex predator isn't picky and will also catch bird-like Pokemon or small mammals. The only thing that stands a chance at taking on an adult Feraligatr in this ecosystem is an invasive apex predator with a type advantage that I'm saving for later. Let's go back to our versatile Zigzagoon. After combing the beaches looking for something that is washed up, and meandering through the marshes snacking on crustaceans, our Zigzagoon finds itself in the most inland habitat and the one with the highest elevation, our uplands consisting of hardwood hammocks and pine flatwoods. And this is where the food web gets a bit messy to follow. Pokemon producers including Sunflora, Gossiflora, and Bounsweet, with Deerling also occurring in this habitat, working two roles as both a producer and herbivore. Other Pokemon eating plant material include Pachirisu, selecting mostly nuts and berries, Torkoal eating low-lying grasses, shrubs, and fruit, Larvesta munching on leaves, and Cutiefly is our pollinator, using its slender mouthparts to drink nectar and collect pollen. Our upland omnivores include Teddiursa, Vulpix, Stunky, Tepig, Trumbeak, and Dwebble, which all probably take small prey like Wormadam, or in Dwebble's case even smaller prey like insect larvae, but also eat fruits, nuts, or foliage. Using our omnivores as a transition into our secondary consumers, we have Quilava and Persian. They probably have a fairly similar diet, with Quilava selecting for slightly smaller prey or using its elongated body shape to dig into burrows or its lighter frame to climb trees. Persian, on the other hand, with its slightly higher attack stat and its higher speed, can take down larger prey such as Zigzagoon or Sawsbuck should any of the deerling evolve. Persian is a great analog to one of the coolest animals in Florida, and one that I have been fortunate enough to see twice, the Florida panther. This is a subspecies of Puma concolor, or cougar, mountain lion, panther, puma, whatever you want to call it, and it's restricted to South Florida. These are critically imperiled big cats with only about 200 individuals left in the wild due to habitat loss and fragmentation. If you want to learn more about Florida panthers, there's a great film out there called Path of the Panther, give it a watch. Another predator living in the uplands is Noctowl. This Pokemon is a nocturnal ambush predator that flies on silent wings just like real-life owls. Medium-sized mammal Pokemon like Stunky are its favorite prey. If you want to learn more about Stunky and Skuntank, as well as real skunks and their ecology, check out my video on what is hunting Skuntank. Oddly enough, we have another nocturnal ambush predator that is low-key one of my favorites from Scarlet and Violet, and that is Spidops. This Pokemon prefers the upland habitats but will venture into the marshes to hunt for prey. Spidops resembles an ogre-faced or net-casting spider from the family Dinopidae. It holds its webs using its front legs before throwing it over top of prey to immobilize them, just like its real-life inspiration. I also have a video on Poké-arachnids, which includes a lot of great footage of dinopid spiders, so check that one out if it doesn't bug you. Get it? Bug. Other insectivores here include the subterranean dunsparce and the arboreal pineco. Now finally, we can talk about the apex predator of the uplands and sometimes the marshes, the invasive Serperior. Legend has it that a Snivy breeding facility located near the Everglades, attempting to crank out shinies, was hit by a hurricane and released these Pokemon into the wild. Although since Snivy is also a very popular first partner Pokemon, it's very possible that trainers coming over to the Everglades have released Serperior once they decided that they couldn't take care of a 10-foot long predator. I believe that Serperior is a constrictor that feeds primarily on medium-sized mammal Pokemon, but really isn't too picky, similar to the invasive Burmese python now found in South Florida. This graphic shows approximately how many animals it takes to feed a Burmese python from birth up until it learns to move growth to reach 13 feet. Most of their diet consists of rodents as juveniles, but as subadults and adults they eat a variety of wading birds, reptiles, and mammals, including white-tailed deer, which is honestly just kind of mind-blowing to think that an entire deer can fit inside the mouth and stomach of this snake. Being a biologist in Florida, Burmese pythons are constantly on my mind when working in the field, and I've even gotten the opportunity to hunt for some to brush up on my snake capture skills. Unfortunately, I haven't found any Serperior yet, but I'll keep looking. Serperior doesn't quite have the body shape of a constrictor, it's really much closer to that of a pit viper, with its somewhat stout and robust body and large head, but this Pokemon line does learn the move Wrap, and I think Constriction can be supplemented with moves like Vine Whip. If it can't wrap its body around a prey item to subdue them, its Vine certainly could. Given that Serperior also learns moves like Mega Drain and Giga Drain, I imagine this Pokemon wraps up its prey and simply drains its life force instead of ingesting them if the prey is something large like a Croconaw or Feraligatr. Burmese pythons have been well documented to prey on alligators, and vice versa actually. So I imagine that with a type advantage, Serperior would do the same in the Pokemon world. Like a super effective stab Leaf Storm against a Feraligatr, that poor guy stands no chance unless it's really over-leveling that Serperior. If food is scarce, Serperior can also supplement its diet by photosynthesizing while basking. Modern reptiles can't use solar beam or photosynthesize, but boy do they just love sitting in the sun to regulate their body temperatures. Now we've talked about sharks, big cats, alligators, and giant invasive snakes, net-throwing spiders, but all of these are all a walk in the park compared to the true menace of the Everglades, the only organism that really scares me when I go outside, and not only inflicts physical damage, but mental and emotional as well, is the mosquito. I think the Everglades in the Pokemon world would be especially terrifying because the mosquitoes here are 7-foot tall alien bodybuilders. Thank goodness Ultra Beasts can't reproduce, that we know of, because otherwise our entire reality might be doomed. Like this thing is the size of a Snorlax and drinks blood, or at least life energy. Assuming there are only a couple that have survived in our dimension, and you have a strong team of Pokemon with you, I think it's relatively safe to still go outside. Just like in real Florida, you have to be prepared for the elements and the bugs anytime you walk out your door. Buzzwole likely prefers mammal-like Pokemon, but with a proboscis harder than Diamond, it could probably feed on just about anything it wants. And there is our mostly complete Pokemon food web of the Florida Everglades. Now all we gotta do is add in our Detritivores, which are organisms that are important for nutrient recycling and kind of break down those dead and decaying plant or animal, or in our case, Pokemon materials. Our aquatic Detritivores include Barboach in the freshwater. This Pokemon is likely a bottom feeder, so anything that perishes and sinks in the marshes is going to be discovered and snacked on by Barboach. Similarly, we have Delmise. It even uses the word detritus in one of its Pokedex entries, which is super cool for them to acknowledge, and multiple of its entries talk about its preference for large prey like whalemur, but I think this is an allusion to the ecosystems created by deceased whales in the ocean floor, known as whale falls. Basically, deep oceans are fairly devoid of nutrients, so when one of the largest animals on the planet perishes and sinks down there, the animals, and in our case the Pokemon, go absolutely nuts on this all-you-can-eat whale buffet. Whale falls support over 400 different species, and over 120 new species have been described just from observing whale falls. Delmise is an anchor. Anchors rest on the bottom of the ocean. Deceased whalemurs probably fall to the bottom of the ocean, so therefore I think Delmise is a whale fall specialist. Our other Detritivores include Gulpin in the marshes, Murkrow pecking away at carcasses, Rellor filling the role of a dung beetle in the uplands, and Drifloon carrying away smaller Pokemon that are on their last leg. This project was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed making my own Pokemon food web this time instead of just kind of taking one from one of the routes, but I might have gone a little overboard with how many Pokemon I put into this because I kept like finding Pokemon that would fit super well, and it's like, oh well, I have to put this in there, and I have to put this other one in there. And then, then we ended up with this huge Pokemon food web that we see now. In the future, let me know if you want more projects like this one, or if you liked the old route systems better. Or if there were other Pokemon you were expecting to see in this food web and didn't, let me know that also. So if you visit the Everglades, make sure to bring a team of strong Pokemon with you and make sure to pack some Max Repels.